There's some works by other artists that have some similarities to Duchamp's Ready-Made. This is the American artist most famous for his photography, Man Ray. Gift in 1921. Well, for Duchamp it's enough just to put an object in an art gallery sometimes to take it away from its function of use, and therefore we approach it in a different way. But Man Ray has done something one step further. Not only could you not use it, but if you tried to use it, it would have the opposite effect from what you were expecting. Instead of an iron helping to kind of make your clothes nice, it would actually be destroying your clothes. Everyday objects that seem to be, we take them for granted that they will serve us, but here suddenly become slightly dangerous, aggressive kind of object. Unsettle us in our sense of understanding of the everyday world, break us away from our frame of mind where we take the world around us for granted and don't really look at it clearly. Similar kind of motivation with Oppenheim Object, 1936. Just an everyday object, a cup and saucer and spoon, but then covered in fur makes them strange. This is as much taking things into surrealism as Dada, really. The ready-made, afterlife of the ready-made in surrealism. Fur, of course, association with living things, not inanimate objects. So that's a kind of breaking of a boundary there. Fur is a slightly sort of fetishistic material as well, it complicates matters further. ARP, most of what ARP does really fits within a category of art rather than anti-art, but ARP was a figure associated with the Dada movement, as much a part of Dada as Duchamp. At a certain earlier moment he makes these collages made according to chance. So rather than a human aesthetic sensibility organizing things, random effects are used. It's collage, it all comes from that Cubist technique, but abstract forms. I don't know whether this is anti-art in a sense of using chance to make art, or whether it's just chance used as a strategy to break away from your habits of working. Some artists use all sorts of strategies to do that, like painting with a rag rather than with a brush, or painting with your left hand instead of your right hand, or do things to break up your habits of working and habits of vision. So chance could be not an attack on order in art, but try to kind of access some larger sense of order. Art himself talks about art without sense, without meaning, as nature is. The idea that kind of nature has its own larger order to it. Or there's a larger pattern that you can be attuned to. It's almost like using the I Ching or something like that for divination. It's chance effect that's used, but for there's a larger meaning and order that is displayed that you access by that. Of course, actually he was very interested in reading about Asian philosophy. Hans Richter also talks about the absence of any ulterior motive enables us to listen to the voice of the unknown and to draw knowledge from that realm of the unknown. Getting rid of your conscious sense of control in the creative process, being passive in the creative process. We're talking about that in relation to Paul Klee. Beyond the narrow rationalism, opening yourself up to some larger logic that is intrinsic to the world. That's a sort of way of thinking, perhaps. Chance in Dada procedures leads to things like automatism in surrealist procedures, trying to let the unconscious take over. A lot of art's work uses these more organic, biomorphic forms. A little bit of parallels with what Miro does in some ways. So this is one of his sculptural reliefs, of which there are many. The Forest from 1916. But he also moves into fully three-dimensional sculpture as well. And just one example. 1938 Growth. They always have these organic associations. Organic process. Similar vocabulary forms really from his 2D relief sculptures to his 3D ones. Tends to work with plaster as his medium, but then later they could be cast in bronze or carved in marble. In some ways, this sort of very reductive, abstract forms reminds us of Brancusi, another abstract sculptor of the time. But Brancusi is much more attuned to the material that he's using. He's very, very much got a sort of aesthetic of truth to materials, working with the nature of the individual material, finding a form appropriate to that material. But that's not the case with art. He'll happily make a form in one material and transfer it to another. And there's very little sense of artist touch. They're very anonymous kind of forms, as if they've just occurred of their own volition. They don't have a kind of a made feel about them. He's much more a modeler, a sort of additive creator, whereas Brancusi is often the carver, the subtractor. He refers to these fully three-dimensional abstract sculptures as his concretions. Concretion, he says, is the result of a process of crystallization. The earth and the stars, the matter of the stone, the plant, the animal, man, all exemplify such a process. Concretion is something that has grown. So it's a sort of imagery of growth, of natural process. Picabia, we're looking at his I See Again in Memory, My Dear Udni, 1914. Yeah, rather similar in some ways to the Duchamp image of the bride. So as if we're looking at the female body, but dissected and simplified, and kind of a metaphor of the machine. Remember, this is the era in which we start to hear about robots and things like that. Sort of kind of man-machine metaphor is a very big metaphor for the early 20th century. Modern production process have turned men into servants of the production line, servants of machine. So human, organic and machines. blurred together. There's something of that same sort of ironic attitude to things that Duchamp has. They met each other. He's less of an intellectual than Duchamp was, though. The machine metaphor is still active here. Amorous Parade, 1917. Could it again be something to do with sort of male-female sexual relations understood in terms of a mechanical metaphor? The same thing that's there in the large glass of Duchamp. Actually, the sort of mechanical metaphor is there all over the place in thinking about human life or organic life. You know, it's there in a lot of scientific thinking as well. It's a machine, but it's not a very functioning machine. It's a use a machine metaphor to talk about human life, but it's also machines seem damaged in the process. The metaphor works against both. Picabia says the machine has become more than a mere adjunct of life. It is really a part of human life, perhaps the very soul. Well, this is the world we live in today. You know, half of you are tapping away at your computers, and probably all of you are more attached to your mobile phones than you know, people even 20 years ago could have imagined. You know, checking your phone all day long, as if it's almost a part of your body. It's, you know, it's hard to imagine yourself without that addition to yourself. It's part of you. This is a very modern kind of experience in a way. So to relate to machines as opposed, say, to tools. You know, agricultural life, people would be quite close to the tools they work with, or craftsmen, but somehow machines, it's a different thing. Portrait of Cézanne. Well, this is very much this sort of in-your-face attack on art, attack on realism. Or, you know, once more, it's a sort of collaging metaphor of putting something from life into art, but just nailing a toy monkey onto a surface. It's like a attack on realism. It's a portrait of Cézanne, and a portrait of Renoir, portrait of Rembrandt, or it's a still life or something like that. Schwitters. Making art out of rubbish. Well, that has a Dada flavour to it, but you know, you could see it as transmuting the rejected, the thrown away, bringing it back into the world of art. He actually went around collecting discarded things. So it becomes a sort of negative portrait of our modern life, what we no longer value enough to keep. It's all something that exists after the moment of printing, mass reproduction that printing allows. So it's only in such a world that you have so much throwaway writing. I mean, say in the 17th century, how much writing would you throw away? You know, you'd be lucky if you even owned a book or something. You'd be unlikely to throw it away. But in the 20th century, all that changes. It's little tram tickets and this and that and the other that are considered of only passing usefulness. So making something valuable out of things of no value, and it's become a strategy many artists have followed since. And a kind of alchemy, you make some gold out of base metals, you make something valuable out of nothing. Of course, it's again Cubist collage behind everything, but he uses a different strategy for putting things together. Sometimes he's using tearing and overlapping, slightly different really. Typography is very important, the words and fragments of words. This is Mertz 163. He uses this term Mertz to describe his collages. It's actually just a fragment of the German word for commerce. You know, it's take it, even the title is a kind of fragment for art that is often made of fragments. This is the cherry picture, sometimes a little bit more sculptural in a way, adding objects that stick out from the surface. He even built whole architectural environments in his home. Merzbau, he called it.
Are these just 3D objects?
Some are, yeah.
Okay,
Some are
it's the same
flat surfaces, and then this is a 3D object, a broken pipe. But in his home, he created a fully sort of 3D environment constructed of found things.
Wow.
It's all often objects that may have a personal association, but we don't know what they are. They have a sense of being. They've been through the hands of an individual person. They're not just. It's not like you've bought a newspaper straight off the newsstand and then you're collaging it into your painting. It's something that's had its life in the world already. Its objects have their personal history, their biography, if you like, before they enter the world of the painting, and they bring the traces of that with them. They're not just of interest for their purely visual qualities. They have the associations of the lives that were led around them and through them. Yeah, it's hard to imagine an artist like Rauschenberg, American artist, without Schwitters. He also used to travel around the area near his studio in New York, gathering things that people had thrown out and making sculptures from that. So it's become a well-established strategy in art making. This is just a randomly chosen example by Rauschenberg, Canyon from 1959. A stuffed bird, and well, here he's got picking up the forms of the bird's wing are picked up in the brushwork. Collaged images and so forth. Quickly, a few other examples. Hannah Hoch, cut with the kitchen knife. 1919. So, photo montage, photo collage, a little bit like Hartfield. She's also a Berlin-based artist. but she lets you notice the joins. And all this kind of anarchic typography that comes from collaging, I suppose, newsprint from different sources, or various printed sources. It's very influential in the punk era. You know, the album covers of the Sex Pistols or something like that. All this was very, influenced by Dada. Because things in the images come from different sources, they're on different scales or from different angles, so already that produces a sort of disorientation when they're put together, and that's encouraged further by the the compositional choices that she makes. Someone who did something rather similar to her is Raoul Haussmann. Tatlin at Home, 1920. Tatlin is the Russian artist that we looked at in his own right. The art critic. We'll have to stop there. So thanks very much.